warm welcome to our speakers here for session 2. I will be introducing them in a moment. So this session focuses on advancing carbon pricing, opportunities, and challenges in light of the latest trends of carbon pricing and carbon markets as highlighted in the 2024 World Bank State and Trends of Carbon Pricing report. So this session provides us with a space for discussing progress and challenges faced in the past year, including reflections and key developments from different jurisdictions. In terms of format, I'll introduce our participants and they will each have 7 minutes to provide reflections on the progresses and challenges faced this past year in their respective jurisdictions. And then we hope to have ample time still for a Q&A, questions and discussion. And I really encourage you to, feel free to write down questions that you may want to raise after our speakers have presented their remarks. I will say we're a little bit behind, so we will keep to our schedule of 7 minutes, and our speakers here have no excuse. There's a big clock in front of us that has the timer, so we'll hold them to it. As was noted in the first section, which I thought was a terrific overview of all the important initiatives that are being spearheaded and coordinated through the PMI, this has been a year with important advances, but also challenges. And this session, of course, will give us an opportunity to dig into this in specific countries and jurisdictions. And it also underscores the important role that global initiatives have to play in this space, including creating forums such as this, and really to have a candid exchange not just on how we enable progress, but also the things that we're finding really hard, some of the challenges that we continue to face, both in advancing carbon pricing and also carbon markets. This is relevant regardless of whether a country is at the very early stage in thinking about system design and development, or in the later stages of implementation or expansion. So again, I just want to commend the PMI just for bringing us together, not just as country participants and partners, but a range of other initiatives and organizations to really help us foster a coordinated and true collaborative approach. I think this is just really, really critical to success for all of us. I'll just take one brief moment to update on the Global Carbon Pricing Challenge, which has just confirmed itself as a knowledge partner of the PMI, so we're pleased to see that. This, for those of you who may not be aware, this is an initiative that really is a partnership of countries committed to carbon pricing supported by international organizations. And it really tries to leverage leader-level support to try and maintain momentum and visibility of some of these initiatives. So it also aims to provide technical support and fitting in and working with PMI and other initiatives to enable that kind of country-to-country exchange. Recently, I just would like to do a quick shout out to our colleagues from Kazakhstan, who along with France became the latest partners of the Global Carbon Pricing Challenge, along with Chile, UK, Germany, Canada, New Zealand, Denmark, Sweden, the EU, and Côte d'Ivoire as a friend, so the list is growing. And we welcome others here to join as partners or friends if of interest, and we're happy to provide more information. So why don't we, without further ado, let's turn now to our second session, and I'm going to introduce the first speaker. Very pleased to have Sébastien Paquot here as our first panelist. After 10 years in the private sector in marketing and innovation fields, Sébastien joined the European Commission in 2015 in DG Environment to work on circular economy. In 2017, he was appointed advisor to the Director General of DG Environment before becoming a member of the private office of Commissioner Vella. In 2019, he joined the EU delegation in China as head of section and counselor for environment and climate, and he returned to DG CLIMA in 2022 as head of unit for climate finance and was recently appointed acting head of the new task force on international carbon pricing and diplomacy, which we'll also be looking forward to hearing about. So just to tee up your remarks, the EU has, of course, made commendable progress in reducing emissions and adopting critical legislative measures during the last year, driven by the overarching goals of the European Green Deal and the 8th Environment Action Programme. Sébastien, can you share with us your thoughts on the key policy developments primarily related to the EU ETS and the European Commissioner's efforts to support international carbon markets, especially under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement? And we'd also be interested in hearing you provide the latest updates, of course, on CBAM. So I'll turn to you to provide your reflections.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Judy. Can you hear me well? It works? Great. So very, very happy to be with you. So it's my first time in a PMI meeting, so I'm feeling a little bit like the new kid on the block. And it's really fantastic to join such a community. I just would like, before starting, to thank the organizer for setting up such a nice program, covering really all the aspects that I'm sure you agree we are all facing. And fully agree that a genuine conversation will be so useful to exchange perspective on where we come from, depending on our different background and context. So very happy to be here. I may start briefly to give some light on this mysterious task force, because I think people would be happy to know what it's about. And it's a bit like the PMI, but in much smaller, because what we're trying to do is to create a space where we can engage with our partner countries by connecting all the policies in the EU and internationally that broadly connect with carbon markets. So you know that we have an ETS, and our colleagues in charge of the ETS have done a great job in engaging with many countries. At the same time, we have a negotiation team which is working on Article 6. Same time, we also have some legislation that may have an effect on VCM, such as the Green Claim Directive, and we also have regulation about the certification of our removals. What we realized is that this was quite fragmented in the European Commission and in the EU in general, and we wanted to create a small but decent team to centralize those information and to be able to engage with any partners willing to engage with us to exchange about those issues, because we believe we're not the only one trying to connect the dots in our own system. We hear a lot of systems which are developing, trying to connect compliance system, international market, and so on. So we very much value exchange on that. We have some elements that we can bring. We have 20 years experience on ETS, but you are also discovering many new elements on which we're sure that other countries can bring a lot. So that's where we really would like to engage, and that's why we have set up this task force. It's in the making, so we have 4 people at the moment. We aim to be 10 by the end of the summer, and with that, I hope we'll be fully equipped to engage with you. So don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested to expand a bit the relationship and the connection with the European Commission. Now I see that I already exhausted 2 minutes, so maybe I have to start to reply to your question, actually. So the first policy I would like to briefly touch upon would be, of course, the EU ETS. The EU ETS has evolved a lot, and it has evolved in line with what we call the Fit for 55 package, which is basically aiming to bring the EU at speed to reach the 2030 target that we set to ourselves, which is minus a reduction of 55% of our emissions. And for that, the ETS will be a key piece. But to meet this new ambition, we had to do 2 things. First, increase the ambition on the ETS. So the change that we implemented in 23 bring the target of emission reduction within the scope of ETS to minus 63%. So that's quite very significant for this scope, which broadly encompass energy and heavy industry. But we also had to extend the scope to make sure we will cover more activities, and so it has been done with the inclusion in the ETS of the maritime sector. So now we have maritime sector included in the ETS, but that's only one part of the story, because aside of what we call the ETS 1, we also establish a new ETS, which is the ETS 2, so a separate tool to address in particular road transport and building with a specific pricing made in the same mechanics that an ETS, so cap and trade, but starting from a different starting point, addressing different kind of emissions. And with that, the 2 ETS combined will cover 75% of the EU emission, and we believe that will be a good engine to reach our target by 2030. If we look more in the result that we achieved in 2023, so last year, that was quite a significant year as well for ETS, because on that year only, with the ETS, we reached a reduction of 16% of emission for the emissions which are covered by the scope of the ETS1. So minus 16% in 1 year, largely driven by a change of energy consumption, much more renewable, less gas, and you may guess why we are consuming less gas. And that led to a reduction of 24% only in power, and it was complemented by 7% reduction also in an industry. So on both sides of the ETS1, we reduced drastically, and this broke the total reduction of the ETS since 25 to minus 47%. Minus 47%. And I just repeat because it's quite huge. If you imagine that in less than 20 years, the total power and energy sector of the EU has decreased by almost 50%. I perceive it as quite gigantic, and we really need to keep going on that direction if we want to achieve our target by 2030. But that's really promising and useful for us in terms of continuing those efforts on the ETS. So that's for ETS. You also know that the ETS has been complemented with CBAM, so the carbon adjustment mechanism. The idea is to avoid carbon leakage, because if we put more pressure on companies in the EU to decrease their emission, they could easily move their activities just beyond the border, and the result for climate would be zero, because the emission would simply be produced in another side of the border. So that's why we have implemented the CBAM. I am happy to answer any further question on the details of CBAM, but what you need to know is that we are moving in 2023 to what we call the transition phase. And transition phase is this moment over 3 years where companies importing in the EU will have to report the embedded emission of the product that they import in the EU in 5 key sectors. So it's not on any product in the EU. It's 5 sectors which are carbon intensive and relatively easy to monitor. It's iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizer, energy, and when I say energy, I mean power and electricity, and hydrogen. So we choose those sectors which have massive in terms of import, high CO2 footprint, but also relatively easy to measure, to try to make the work of the importers as easy as possible. And now we are using this transition period to establish the most accurate methodologies to measure those emissions, so that by 2026 the CBAM can really enter into force, with then the first payment to be done. So the purchasing of CBAM certificates equivalent to the value of the CO2 in the product which will be imported. So I see I have 20 seconds to cover the rest. I may not behave perfectly well, but I will do my best. 2 other policy I wanted to flag. We call it CRCF. We very much like the acronyms, but it stands for the certification of removal in the EU. And why are we starting with that? Because we came up with our assessment for the 2040 target. So we are 2030, now we move to 2040. The recommendation of the Commission would be to move to a 90% decrease of our emission, but we know that if we want to achieve that, and we have to achieve it domestically, because all climate laws say that the emission reduction in the EU have to be achieved domestically, we know that we will have to rely on some removals. And that's why we want to put in place the certification of removal within the EU, to know which kind of removal would be good enough to be integrated into the achievement of our NDC, and ultimately of our climate neutrality target by 2050. So that's CRCF. And let me also touch a brief word on Article 6. I'm not a negotiator. I'm sure you know my colleague Martin Eschen, which is leading those negotiations for the EU for 15 years maybe. And I met with him when he came back from Bonn 2 weeks ago, and I must say he was quite positive. And Martin is not so often positive, so it's good to note. And I think he was very positive about trying to reach a deal by Baku. So we stay fully committed to reach a deal on Article 6 as soon as possible. He told me that now we have a text, and a text that can be negotiated and discussed, that we have several milestones from now to Baku to reach an agreement. So that would be really the plan, trying to solve the pending issue. The text is full of brackets, of course, but the idea would be to try to lift most of the brackets before Baku to try to have an agreement on that, because I think we all understand that we need 6.2 and we need 6.4 to have more meaningful exchange of carbon credits across the world and in respect with our NDC. If I need to summarize it, I would say we would only keep one motto in relation with international carbon market in general, is let's do it in view of achieving Paris Agreement. That would be the red line for the EU, is that anything which is done under Article 6 or under VCM should be done in full alignment with Paris Agreement. And on that, I'm sure we all agree here. It's all about finding the modalities to make it work on both international market and voluntary carbon market. I stop here, but more than happy to continue over coffees and more. And sorry for time's up.
That was a wonderful, comprehensive overview, and hopefully we'll have a chance to follow up. And apologies if you felt rushed, but merci, Sébastien. That was just a terrific update and look ahead. So I'd like now to turn to Dirk Weinreich. Dirk is the head of division at Climate Legislation and Emissions Trading at Germany's Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. So welcome, Dirk. Just to tee up your remarks, similar to what happened at the EU level, Germany made important progress over the last 12 months as well. Both the Climate Action Program and the Climate Action Act are central to Germany's efforts to meet its 2030 climate targets, and this includes expanding the ETS sector to the transport and building sector. Could you provide us a little bit of an update in terms of current status of these efforts and insights into some of the challenges of expanding the ETS to these more difficult sectors, and how Germany also may plan to support international carbon markets? And I recognize those may be for some follow-up discussion as well. So over to you, Dirk.
Thank you very much, Judy. Can you hear me? Okay. First remark, I'm very happy to be here today. It has been a while to be in such an important PMI forum. I highly appreciate the very important work of PNI in advancing carbon pricing and markets. And I'm also happy that PMI will collaborate with ICAP, which I have the honor to co-chair. So once again, thank you for having me here. On the subject, Germany has a bit more ambitious goals than the EU. We are planning to reach climate neutrality, greenhouse gas neutrality already by 2045, and therefore we follow a mix. On the one hand, as Sébastien just mentioned, we clearly rely, and as a key instrument, we rely on the reformed EU ETS, because we think that an emissions trading system can be the motor for the big transformation to net zero that we all are facing. On the other hand, as we have more ambitious goals, and as there's always also sometimes the need to address specific transformation tasks, and especially the innovation you need for that. The breakthrough innovations, for instance, in the steel sector, by specific measures and also maybe financial support, we rely on a mix of measures. So complementary measures beside our European ETS. And these are under the German Federal Climate Change Act and our Climate Action Program that Judy, you mentioned. So to come to the core of your question, we recently, besides the policy mix I mentioned, we found that especially in the heat and the transport sector, emissions reductions were not sufficient enough. So we felt that there is a need for a carbon price for all fossil fuels, which will be the case next, as Sébastien mentioned, by 2027, but was not the case now. So in 2021, we introduced our national fuel emissions trading system. And of course, we are happy that it may also have inspired the EU to develop such a system at the EU level. So what is it doing right now? It's covering from 2021 on heat generation, transport, small industries, as long as they are not under the ETS 1, and the waste incineration. And it is a bit a different system than the emissions trading 1 system at the EU level, which is going directly to the big emitters, but you could not include 1,000 car drivers, so it regulates at the upstream level, and it addresses the fuel sellers. They are under the ETS 2. The fuel seller, of course, passes the carbon price directly to the consumer, so it's a quite direct price signal for the consumer, which is also meant to be. But this makes also the situation quite sensitive, because in these systems, like ETS2 or our national system, it's directly, it has effect to those who have fossil heating, or drive fossil-fueled cars. So of course we have to care for especially low-income households, which might have problems to care for, to face higher prices. So what we did not start with a full ETS, a national ETS on fuels with a fixed cap and free pricing, but we start with a gradual phase-in from 25 euros in 2021. Now it's around 45, and then we go to up to 55 in the next year, and then we have a price corridor in 2026, and then it was meant to be with a fixed cap and a free pricing up from 2027 on, but then now we are happy that the EU takes over, because of course a broader system with a broader price is more efficient. So what did we learn? In short, we made good experiences. The system is quite accepted. All the implementation has been done. Cap auctioning, MRV, registry, and the acceptance also has to do with something we did. We had a specific carbon leakage protection system for those sectors and for those small industry branches who suffer competitive issues. They get financial grants due to benchmark systems following a list of ETS. It's based on a list of leakage branches which are under the ETS1, and I think this was also important that we might introduce such a system in the ETS2, but there the Commission will leave it over to the member states to do that. We have huge revenues. We have alone in 2023 we had 10.7 billion euros in Germany of our national system only, and of course we use this for those measures which are in the policy mix beside the ETS. The next steps are that we transfer our national ETS into the ETS2. We have a bit broader scope than foreseen in the directive for the ETS2. We will use an opt-in to keep that broad scope in Germany. And of course, we will use the revenues to develop more and more accompanying measures, also to avoid high CO2 prices, because if the ETS2 starts, it will be a fixed cap and free pricing in the EU. And we will also prepare social compensation, I mentioned, for vulnerable households. One short sentence, or two sentences, if I may, to the German support of international carbon markets. We are always have been keen to have a global carbon pricing, utmost global. Also, we would like to have more and more ETS partners, of course. We said pricing is not all, but of course it is the motor, the key motor for Paris implementation. So we saw support introduction of ETSs through an own capacity building program. Everybody is invited to approach me if you are interested in this German capacity building program on ETS. Our last partner was Brazil, Beatriz. And we also support those various initiatives like the PMI, like ICAP I mentioned, like the carbon market platform we once introduced under a German presidency, and of course also the global carbon pricing challenge. Judy, thank you very much for your patience.
Thanks very much, Dirk. Really appreciate those comments, and no doubt we'll have questions to hear more about some of those updates. I'm really pleased now to turn to Kaan Moralı, is the head of carbon pricing carbon pricing department in the Directorate of Climate Change in Türkiye. He's responsible for the coordination of the emissions trading system, of domestic crediting systems, and also carbon market-related studies. So, Kaan, terrific to have you as part of this session. Türkiye updated its NDC for 2030 and set ambitious targets for increasing renewable energy capacity in its national energy plan. Of particular interest, I think, to this audience, and certainly this panel, is Türkiye's plan to launch a pilot ETS this year. If you could please share a bit more on how the preparations for that pilot are going, maybe some of the challenges and opportunities that you've been encountering, and any insights into Türkiye's ambitions to use carbon markets in this context. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Also, first of all, I have to declare my pleasure for the invitation of the World Bank and for the organization of this good organization, this Global Knowledge Forum, because this such kind of organization is really important for us and for the other partners to exchange knowledge. And thanks to Judy for your nice moderation. Yes, in Turkey. Now the development of emission trading system is a big challenge in our hands, and I would like to call the 2021, because this year is a very important year for us, for our climate policies. This year our President Mr. Erdogan announced that Turkey will ratify the Paris Agreement, and also we declared our 2053 net zero emission target. And after this political development, we started to prepare our climate law. Climate law is important for us because according to the climate law, the general framework of the emission trading system and the domestic trading system will be scheduled in our climate law. Therefore, nowadays there are some political discussions regarding in Turkey regarding this climate law. Before coming here, we made a meeting with our Deputy President of Turkey regarding the development of emission trading system and domestic trading system and the climate law. And hopefully our target is to send the climate law to Turkish Parliament, because in Turkey, Turkish Parliament will give the decision, and then this text, after the decision of the Parliament, published in the official journal of Turkey. I would like to say about NDC target. Till 2030, we have doubled our emission reduction target as from 21% to 41% reduction. And we say that our emission will peak in 2038. This is our statement in our NDC. Also, energy transition has been identified our key policy in our NDC. I would like to give some numbers about our energy policy. In terms of the number, the share of the renewable energy in total installed electricity capacity in Turkey has reached 56%. And with this percentage, Turkey ranks 5th in Europe and 11th in the world as globally. And Turkey aims to triple its renewable energy capacity by adding 60 gigawatt of renewable energy sources to its installed capacity by 2035. And to do this, also energy transition means also a continuous upgrade of the grid of electricity. That's why Turkey is working towards a green grid that has strong interconnectivity and is able to manage projected renewable energy increase. We have a 10 billion US dollar grid investment plan by 2030. Also in energy efficiency, we have some program. We have renewable energy sources support mechanism in Turkey and the renewable energy resource area called YEKA, which are purchase guarantees to support renewable energy investments. These are the key issues from our NDC targets, because we declared a economy-wide NDC, and the renewable energy is the focus of our abatement policies. Also, regarding the carbon markets, with the support of the PMI, Partnership for Market Readiness Program, between 2013 and 2021, we have made good studies, economic modelings regarding the carbon markets and the other studies. And as a result of these PMI projects, the most appropriate carbon pricing instrument for Turkey was identified as emission trading system. After these studies, we have identified this emission trading system to all our national policies documents, our development plan, our yearly programs. We have identified emission trading system. Since 2015, we have a MRV system with electricity investment, cement, iron and steel refinery, ceramics, lime, paper, chemicals, and glass sectors. We are following around 750 installations data from all points sources of greenhouse gases. And this brings us in total to 275 million ton carbon dioxide emissions, which equals to half of the emissions of Turkey. And our intention in the pilot ETS to start with the big emitters. The big emitters means that the ones above their emissions above 500,000 tons, and this cover almost 9% of emissions of MRV installations in Turkey. There is an emission map in Turkey, and it is our luck to start to give administrative easiness. This will be important for us. And with the support of the PMI program, in the April we made an opening ceremony. Flavia attended this ceremony. Thank you very much again. Also, Humberto Lopez, the country director of Turkey, attended this organization. Our minister also. After making a good opening ceremony, we have started our procurement procedures. And with the support of the PMI, our intention is to finalize the design options. Also, we have developed some design options, but by taking some technical support to finalize the design elements, the cap, scope, and distribution of allowances, and making all socio-economic impact studies, including just transition policies. Our intention is to announce our ETS design within this year, and to start with the emissions of 2025 emissions. As I said, first phase will be as a pilot phase, and the penalties, sanctions, and some administrative issues will be flexible in this pilot phase. After pilot phase, we will start with the real first phase. Maybe the intention is to start the first phase with the emissions of the year 2027. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaan. Really appreciate those updates. Really interesting to hear across all fronts. So thank you very much. I'm delighted to now turn to our final panelist. Beatriz Soares de Silva is General Coordinator for Green Finance at Brazil's Ministry of Development, Industry, Trade and Services. as Brazil prepares for COP30 next year under the leadership of a climate action-oriented president. There are many climate policy developments in the country, of course, that we're all very interested in following closely, especially on introducing a federal emissions trading system. With the National Congress, I think, expected to finalize this and approve this soon, it would be terrific to get an update from you on the current state of play with the ETS, its timelines, and Brazil's plans to utilize international carbon markets. So over to you, Beatriz.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here to sharing what's happening in Brazil. As Dirk mentioned, there are many climate policy developments since last year, the new government. And at the moment, the federal government is developing the new climate plan that is going to lay the basis for our defining our NDC for 2035. And this work stream also includes a discussion on what role the Brazilian ETS will have as an instrument of the climate policy. As you know, we are on the verge of approval of a bill which institutes the Brazilian ETS, what we call SBCE. The bill is the result of a proposal of the federal government that was accepted by the Senate. It was approved on October by the Senate and on December by the Chamber of Deputies. This test approval on the Chamber of Deputies has major modifications, especially regarding REDD+ activities. Some of them we're trying to reverse because the bill came back to the Senate, and we are trying to reverse the most problematic issues. But the federal government is very closely following the progress of the bill, and we are very committed to approve it still this year. In the meantime, as we don't have a law, we are already carrying out some activities and studies to inform the regulating of the law as soon as it is approved. There are a lot of work to be done, but we are already advancing some discussions to inform the decision-making process after the bill is approved. So among the questions we need to answer after the approval of the bill, there is what activity sources and gases will be regulated. The law established a very general threshold of 25,000 tons that will be regulated, but says that this threshold could be increased considering a gradual implementation, so we can decide if we will start with a higher threshold. We have to discuss setting the caps, and this work has to be in line with what the modeling work is being done on the new climate plan, because the budget of the market has to be in the budget of our NDC. We have to discuss issues regarding offsets, which is very linked to the ITMOs. We have to establish procedures to establish the MRV regulations, rules, and procedures. And we have to create the central registry. So all these topics are, as we don't have a body we don't have the law, and then we have a body appointed to deal with all these issues, we are discussing these topics on an interministerial working group that is coordinated by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and by the Ministry of Finance. The group has a mandate for 1 year, and then the recommendations will have to present it to interministerial committee for decision. And to bring inputs to these discussions, we have a lot of support from international cooperation. Ministry of Finance got support from PMI through the just-in-time modality, and we're using this resource to tackle 3 issues. The first one is updating the modeling work we have done during the Brazil PMI project. It ended on 2020, so we have to update this modeling work. We hired a consultant to make a concept note on the registry, and we hire a team of consultants that is proposing a roadmap for the implementation. And we are at the Ministry of Finance. Sorry, I was a servant of the Minister of Finance, as Dirk remembered, at the Ministry of Industry. I'm right now. We also has partners helping us with some of these topics. We have support from the CLIMA program, and with the support, we are dealing with hiring a consultant to help us defining the activities, sources, and gases to be regulated, and to help us deal with all this massive data on modeling work. We also have a stream of work to develop a proposal of MRV system, and we are focusing first on the cement, steel, and pulp and paper sectors. And we have also support from the British government through the UK Pact initiative. And in this project, we are dealing with the offsets. So the consultants are helping us to decide what kind of offsets we are going to use, what is the threshold, the percentage that we're going to accept, and also the connection between the registry, the central registry, and the registry from the offsets, because our design says that we are going to use the independent program of carbon crediting from the voluntary markets. So all these issues are bring up to us, and then we discuss in the working group, and then it will going to be decided and take it to the interministerial committee for decision. Our studies, the deadline is for the beginning of next year, but the law says as when the law is approved, we have 1 year extendable for 1 more year to set up all the rules and regulations, and then we are going to collect 2 years of data, and then the market will begin after 1 year of the publication of the National Allocation Plan. Regarding international carbon markets, we are considering to participate, the possibility to participate in the Article 6, but we have to decide on what conditions, because our NDC is too ambitious, and we have to decide if we have space to sell extra mitigation results, and it's dependent on the modeling we are doing also in the work stream on the new climate policy. ITMOs is an issue in Brazil, so we are the working group also discussing this issue and trying to set up some criteria and conditions for using the offsets. And all these discussions, again, it's going to present it to interministerial committee, which is attentive to the urgency to achieve the NDC and ensuring the integrity of the mitigation instrument. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Thank you so much, Beatriz. Obviously, everyone, I think, really interested in those developments. I think thanks to our panelists who were able to really keep their remarks in a fairly tight time frame. We do have time for some discussion and questions, and please feel free to use the microphone at your table. Please introduce yourselves. This is a great opportunity to maybe tease out some of the themes and ideas and updates that we've heard an overview of. So please raise your hand and feel free to bring forward your questions. Look forward to being able to hear a bit more from each of our panelists today. So I'm going to open up the floor. And while people are reflecting maybe on what they want to bring forward, maybe I can follow up and start some off. Oh, we have a hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for Sébastien. It caught my attention, one of the last comments that you made on the standards for forestry. Did I catch well what you were saying? You were talking about that the European Union was going to develop internal standards so that you could certify or do some kind of process to revise that the units that will go into your ETS will have a certain quality that you will need so that they can be used by the European Union. So my question is, are you thinking on maybe taking into account some lessons learned from already standards being developed, such as R3s, that right now have been quite a hot topic because it doesn't comply with the situations or national circumstances of some Latin American countries and also as well as some African countries. So I don't know if you can maybe like say something else besides the information that you gave us. Thank you.
Sure, and thanks a lot for the question. So let me maybe take a brief step back in explaining the frame of this removal certification scheme. So it will aim at certifying three kinds of removal. The first one is permanent removal, so removal into the ground, like carbon capture or BECCS, so biological carbon capture, that we send into the ground and it's removed in principle forever. Second would be what we call carbon farming, and that's what you're referring for, so any kind of carbon that we can capture from land use. And the third one would be carbon sequestrated into product. And we know that those three different kind of removals have a different lifespan. And what's we are working on now is to decide what would be the final use for those different kind of removals. So you mentioned to integrate into the ETS. That's not decided yet. It can be one of the options, can be for some, can be for all, but it's not decided yet. So the first thing is let's work on certifying the removals, to define methodologies, to make sure that we have strong removals. And so now we have established the key criteria, such as the quantification, the additionality, and so on. And now we are working on the methodologies. We have 2 years to develop methodologies for each specific type of certified removal, including those from land use. And there, very clearly, we will build on the lessons learned from R3, from Vera, from any kind of private standard that has been developed so far, so that we try to set strong baseline and create a lot of trust in those certification. So that will be the main aim, is to make sure that what is certified can be trusted, so that it can be used as well as possible to enter in the different compliance system of the EU or in other system. The only thing which is key is that the regulation says that the removal should be used to contribute to the EU NDC, because we know that by 2050 we will need so much removals, and we want those removals to contribute to those NDCs. For the rest, it's relatively open.
Thank you. Alexis Leroy, Yetabi PMI. So, Sébastien, I have another question for you on the CBAM. On the CBAM, do you contemplate at some point that instead of paying a levy, some credit may be eligible to allow carbon finance to help developing countries? Is that an option? Or is it only going to be a payment, or a tax or a levy to adjust to the carbon level?
Well, I'm trying to understand to reply correctly, but so far the CBAM is very much what you said. So,
but what kind of credit will be eligible then? If
well, there is no question of credit. What is eligible is the price paid by a company, in principle based on the compliance system in the country of origin. So what we are looking for is carbon tax, ETS, which are in principle setting a price on carbon in one country, and when this price is paid in the country, is deducted when crossing the border in the EU, and this would be alleviated from the total price to be paid at the border. So far, we have no decision on whether some kind of crediting would be taken into account, and our colleagues from TaxSud are reflecting on the methodology to be applied for that. But originally, the main, which is already certain, is the compliance system and the carbon taxes would be taken into account. Crediting is not yet decided.
Thank you.
To complement?
If I may add, it could even be a bit harder if you have the CBAM and you have in the third country, you have a pricing system in place, then you, as Sébastien said, you can deduct the price that is paid for the same good. In the third country, you can deduct it from the price you have to pay as importer into the EU. Yeah? But as long as you allow crediting systems in the foreign pricing system, then this would also even be a reason not to deduct the whole price from the price under the CBAM. Yeah, because of course only the effective price that is paid in the third country could be deducted from the price that has to be paid at the European border under the CBAM. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentations. And when you presented, Rosario, you said your NDCs are too ambitious, and governments are wondering about, should we be selling or not? And we're seeing that in a lot of countries, right? And we're building country capacity to generate a supply of very high integrity credits, building the capacity, institutional capacity, to be able to market them, to monetize them, either through VCM or ITMOs. And now they're facing the same question and the same challenge. And so I'm just wondering in Brazil, because there is a voluntary carbon market already ongoing, so how do you manage that? And everyone, I think, is in the same transition, right, as they're waiting for Article 6. And so I'm just curious, for Brazil, but many countries here, how are you managing this?
That's a huge topic of discussions. The thing is, the law says if the credit generated in the voluntary market, if it wants to sell as ITMOs, you have to have an authorization of our national designated authority. So if the national designated authority authorize the ITMOs, it's an issue that's what we are dealing. We will have to have, for example, projections of what our emission will be, and we will have to have estimation of that year, how is our emissions that year, and then we are going to decide if there's a leftover or not. So how do you gonna do this? Our inventory is made for 4 years now, and we are preparing to make an inventory for 2 years. But that's what we are discussing in the working group, to see how we're gonna manage, because there are two alternatives. We can use the voluntary credits, or you can make the bilateral agreements. Yeah. So we have to have the data to know how to measure all the things. That's why we are taking care with selling of ITMOs, and people are crazy in Brazil because they all want to sell their credits. So it's not decided. We have a lot of work to do, but it's a work in progress.
Right. So also, but can people sell on the voluntary market to a corporate and not have anything to do with government? They just do it.
Yeah, that's what we're
considering.
considering.
Count it, and there's no corresponding adjustment. There's nothing. It's just what it is.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I think there was another question behind at the second table, or did I know? Okay, other hands. Juan Pedro. Oh, say yes, please. Yeah.
So thank you. This is for Brazil. So do you have any idea of the coverage of the ETS, given that your country is fairly clean in terms of energy? And I know that land use change and yeah, it's an issue there. That's one thing. And for our colleague Sébastien from the European Union, you said that no crediting from abroad in the EU ETS, right? I mean, for the time being. But given that what you said in terms of if Article 6 is implemented, robustly and following the principles of the Paris Agreement, will the EU ETS consider, given that you were a big player when the CDM was very high on the top, in terms of Article 6, for instance, because you will need a lot of, offsetting, for instance, if you need to reach those very ambitious goals before 2050. So $1 million question.
So coverage is another issue that we have to discuss. But the PMR project, Brazil PMR project, recommended to start with industry, a lot of subsectors of industry, and fuels for transportation. That not the supply power, supply energy, because we have a very specific organization of our supply. We have 80% of emissions that comes from renewable energy, and we have a system that is centralized. It's the government who says which power station we're going to generate. So it's a lot of work and complications to do with power sector. But as we are going to discuss all of this again and start to discuss coverage, maybe power sector can enter, but it's an issue.
No, thanks for the very good question. So just to remind you, the principle is that we have to achieve our NDC and our climate neutrality domestically. So that leaves very little space to buy something. And so if we would have to buy something, if we would decide to do that, it should be something that we use for exceeding the NDC, which means that we would have, for example, buy credits now that would store to go beyond neutrality in 2050, which is making our challenge even more complicated. So there are no evident reason to do that, except for supporting some country and to contributing to the work on the crediting and the integrity of the credits. So we are investigating options, but it's far from being evident because, as you said, we already have a huge challenge to be done domestically. And if we look back to the ETS specifically, I think we learned the lesson of the CDM quite the hard way. So we know that if there is an influx of credits in the system, it can really lead to a crash of the pricing. And now we have been successful over the last 2-3 years because thanks to the Green Deal and the policy environment that has been set up, the price have increased dramatically. So it moved to 20 to 100 and now it's stabilized at around 70. And we need this price to be high. And I know it's a challenge for companies, but they manage to adjust. And if we would allow too much credit to flow in the system, the risk would be to have this price to crash again. And what we're trying to do is precisely the opposite. We have a declining cap, which is decreasing 4% a year. So we're taking allowance out of the system to maintain a limit in the supply and high prices. So that's what we have to deal when we're asked with crediting. So I think as a first option, allowing credit from outside the EU into the ETS will probably not fly. What we may have to look at some point, but probably not now, is whether the removals that we are crediting within the EU, because they are domestic, then they would comply with our climate law, and we could maybe at some point see an interaction between those removals and the EU ETS. But even with those removals, it would in principle rather be to try to offset residual emission to make sure that we don't kill the price again. And I think that's, from the EU perspective, if I enlarge a bit the perspective, that's our main concern when we look at international carbon market in general. We, as everyone, we share the concern of the integrity of the supply, so we only want super good quality credit, and I think that's the same for everyone. But then we also want to look at the impact on the demand, because we have many companies that have a lot of action that they can still do, and we don't want to use credit to postpone mitigation action that can be done by the companies. And this, I think it's the same in every country. There are many actions that can be done by companies, and a too strong inflow of credits can really delay those actions. And that's where we all need to find the right balance. For which kind of emission do we accept credit? Where do we set the threshold? Not easy, but that's, I think, one of the challenge that we all face. And Dirk, if you want to complement, because you're in the same boat, and so don't hesitate.
Well, thank you very much. I have maybe my own reflection, and then maybe one question to both Turkey and Brazil. One reflection is that I was also involved in the PMR, where the Turkey also worked on the ETS piloting, and also Brazil was also working on the modeling in terms of how their carbon pricing or mechanism could work. So I was really, first of all, huge congratulations to both countries. Really, you kind of coming from the readiness, and then now you're working on the building, and a bill and all the legislation. Really, actually working on the implementation, which is currently this PMI really stands for. So again, it takes time from readiness to implementation, but I think both of your countries really demonstrate itself how this could work from readiness, implementation, and also all the capacity building. So again, I just wanted to take this opportunity because I was also involved in the PMR, and then I really was impressed by what was presented by both countries. And also huge congratulations to all the World Bank colleagues to really get into this. And of course, implementation is a challenge, I'm sure. And this is something I think PMR is really useful forum to really support each other. Particularly, I heard that of course you're working on ETS, but at the same time you are working on offset, and I heard accrediting mechanism. So for the Turkey, are you also considering like development of a domestic crediting mechanism by your own country, or also kind of just one question, and then maybe that could be also be something to be discussed in the Brazil. I understand there is a similar kind of a session is coming up, but wanted to ask, do you also have in developing domestic mechanism, creating offset mechanism? So that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kazu, for your question. Yes, at the same time with the emission trading system, our main target is to develop a domestic crediting mechanism and to use these credits, our own emission trading system again. This is one of our target. To do this, last year we have in Turkey there is a Turkish standard institutions who develops these technical standards and the criteria. As Directorate of Climate Change, which I am working here, we have made a protocol with these standard institutions to develop these standards and methodologies for these domestic crediting mechanisms. And now, at our first study is our national estate lands we have belongs to the governments, and to develop some afforestation projects in these areas to develop, to generate carbon credits in these areas. This is one of the project. Also, in agriculture area, we are planning some develop some standardization, some methodologies. But when you see the map of Turkey in the VCM, the most of the credits, almost 99% of the credits comes from the renewable energy projects. And as I said before, our NDC based on the emissions, our emission targets, based on the reductions coming from these projects. Therefore, like Brazil, we haven't given any political decision yet to participate in Article 6. Within 2 weeks later, we will make important meetings. In Turkey, there's a climate change and adaptation board, and this board gives the political decision regarding like adoption of NDC and participate in the Article 6. And we will make a technical meetings and to report the results of this meeting to climate change adaptation board to become a seller or to become a seller and buyer at the same time, maybe after 2030. These are some discussions regarding our VCM studies. Yeah, thank you.
And Beatriz, if you want to take a minute or two just to provide a response, and then we'll wrap up the session so that we will have time for lunch. But please go ahead and provide some.
At the beginning, we're not thinking about a national offsetting program. What the bill says is we are going to credentiate the methodologies used in the voluntary market. So you're gonna use the supply structure of these programs to generate the credits. But there are a lot of discussions in Brazil about what we call tropicalization of the methodologies. A lot of project developers think that these methodologies are not very specific to Brazil needs in terms of emissions factor, emissions factors of conversion, and also for the agriculture projects. They do not bring methodologies specific for different kind of agricultural production that we have. So in this work that we've done with the support of the UK government, we are now deep diving on these methodologies and seeing what we can do. And maybe we first of all thought that we are going to credentiate the methodology that there is, and it's good. But maybe we can move on to something like California does. We have been talking to them to develop specific method, use the structure of the voluntary programs, but develop specific methodologies for Brazil ETS. It's what this project is going to recommend to us, and let's see what decision we'll make.
Thank you very much. I feel that this conversation